Moments after threatening Earth, the Galactic Council was erased. The chamber of the Galactic Council was built to make visitors feel small. Its walls rose higher than mountains, carved from black stone that swallowed light. 12 thrones sat in a circle, each one designed for a different species, each one occupied by beings who had ruled the stars for longer than most civilizations had existed. High Arbiter Velkith sat upon the tallest throne. His body was long and thin, covered in scales that shifted color with his mood. Right now they burned a deep red, the color of anger. He looked down at the holographic display floating in the center of the chamber, showing a small blue planet spinning slowly in the void. Earth, the human home world. They have refused. Again, said Velkith, his voice echoing through the massive room. The humans will not accept our terms. The other council members shifted in their seats. Some were giants covered in thick fur. Others were small creatures with too many eyes. One was a cloud of gas held together by an ancient machine. They came from different worlds, different histories, different forms of life, but they all agreed on one thing: humanity was a problem. They expand too fast, said Counselor Thrick, a being made of crystal that chimed when she spoke. In 200 years they have taken 40 worlds. No young species has ever grown so quickly. They refuse the calming protocols, added another voice. Every other species accepts genetic modification when they join galactic society. It makes them peaceful. It makes them safe. The humans say no. Velkith's scales turned darker. The calming protocols were the foundation of galactic peace. They adjusted the brain chemistry of aggressive species, removing the desire for war and conquest. Every species under council rule had accepted this gift. It was not optional, but humans kept saying no. They called it the death of free will. They used words like dignity and choice as if these things mattered more than 300,000 years of galactic order. They are children, Velkith said, children who have found dangerous toys and do not know their place. It is time to teach them. He pressed a symbol on his throne and a new image appeared in the chamber, a fleet of ships, hundreds of them, each one the size of a small moon. These were planet crackers, weapons capable of breaking a world into pieces. They had been used only 3 times in galactic history, each time to end a species that threatened the Council's peace. The fleet is already at the edge of their solar system, Velkith announced. I will give them one final chance, 90 rotations, to surrender. If they refuse, Earth dies. None of the other council members objected. This was how things were done. This was how order was maintained. Young species either learned to obey or they ceased to exist. It was simple. It was clean. It had worked for 300,000 years. Velkith activated the quantum communication link, a beam of energy that could carry messages across the galaxy in an instant. He spoke slowly and clearly, making sure every word would be understood. People of Earth, this is High Orbiter Velkith of the Galactic Council. You have 90 rotations to surrender all military vessels, submit to neural modification, and accept permanent observer status in galactic affairs. If you do not comply, your planet will be destroyed. There will be no negotiation. There will be no second warning. This is your only chance. He ended the transmission and sat back in his throne, satisfied. He had done This many times before with other species. Some surrendered immediately. Some needed to see a demonstration. A single city erased to prove the council was serious, but they all surrendered. Eventually, everyone did. The response came faster than expected. The holographic display flickered, and a human face appeared. It was a woman, perhaps 60 years old by human counting. Her hair was gray and cut short. Her eyes were calm in a way that Velkeith found strange. She should be afraid. She should be desperate. Instead, she looked at the 12 most powerful beings in the galaxy as if they were mildly interesting, nothing more. I am Director Miriam Chen, she said, of the Office of Quiet Affairs. I speak for Earth. Vel had never heard of this office. His intelligence networks knew every human government agency, every military branch, every secret department. This woman came from nowhere. You have heard our terms, he said. Do you accept? Director Chen smiled. It was a small smile, polite and professional, the kind of smile someone might give before refusing a dinner invitation. We decline, she said respectfully. Laughter filled the council chamber. Councillor Thrick's crystals chimed with amusement. The gas cloud pulsed with colors that meant mockery in its ancient language. Even Velkeith allowed himself a thin smile. You decline, he repeated. Do you understand what this means? We will destroy your world. Every human on Earth will die. Your species will be ended. We understand your threat. Director Chen replied. Her voice did not waver. Her eyes did not blink. We simply do not accept it. Perhaps you should reconsider your position, High Arbiter. There is still time to choose peace. This was madness. No species had ever refused the Council's ultimatum. No species had ever suggested that the Council should reconsider. Velkeith felt his scales turn bright red with fury. Advance the fleet, he ordered. Begin the approach to Earth. Let them see what is coming for them. The Council members touched their controls, sending orders to the Planet Cracker fleet. On screens around the chamber, the massive ships began to move, accelerating toward the small blue world that had dared to say no. Director Chen watched them on her own screens far away on Earth. She nodded once, as if she had expected exactly this response. Very well, she said. We gave you a chance. Transmission ended. Velkeith turned to address the other council members, ready to discuss the timeline for Earth's destruction. He never finished his sentence. Every light in the chamber died at once. The darkness was absolute, deeper than space itself. The ancient machines that powered Nexus Prime fell silent for the first time in 300,000 years. The Galactic Council sat in complete darkness, unable to see, unable to speak, unable to understand what was happening. Then the lights returned. 11 thrones were empty. Velkeith was gone. The other council members were gone. Their seats held nothing but shadows. There was no sign of struggle, no evidence of weapons, no bodies, no blood. They had simply vanished, erased from existence in a single moment of darkness. Across the galaxy, trillions of beings watched their feeds go silent. The council was gone, and on Earth, Director Miriam Chen poured herself a cup of tea and waited for the galaxy to understand what had just happened. Moments after threatening Earth, the Galactic Council was erased. The news spread across the galaxy like fire. Through dry grass, on 1,000 worlds, beings of every shape and size watched their screens in silence. The Galactic Council, the power that had ruled over them for 300,000 years, had vanished in an instant. No one understood how it had happened. The planet Cracker fleet still hung at the edge of human space, its hundreds of ships waiting for orders that would never come. Admiral Crix, a massive creature covered in battle scars, tried again and again to reach Nexus Prime. His communication officers sent messages on every frequency. They received nothing but silence. Send scouts to the Council home worlds, Crix ordered. His voice was steady, but his 4 hearts beat faster than normal. Something was very wrong. The scouts jumped through space, traveling faster than light to reach the 12 worlds where Council species had built their civilizations. What they found made no sense. On Velketh's home world, the entire government had disappeared, not just the High Arbiter, but every official, every minister, every military commander who held power. Security recordings showed them in their offices one moment, then empty rooms the next. There was no flash of light, no sound, no warning. People simply stopped existing. The same pattern repeated on every Council home world. Leadership structures erased, command chains broken, but ordinary citizens remained untouched. Farmers still worked there. Fields, children still played in the streets. Shopkeepers still sold their goods. Only those who held power were taken. It was precise. It was surgical. It was terrifying. Sir was a young diplomat, the nephew of High Arbiter Valk. He had been traveling to a minor trade negotiation when the vanishing happened. It was a small mission, unimportant enough that no one had bothered to erase him. He learned about his uncle's disappearance while sitting in the waiting room of a trading station, watching the news on a public screen. The reporters spoke in confused voices, showing the same footage over and over. Empty thrones, empty offices, empty seats of power. Uncle Sir whispered. His scale, so similar to Velketh's, turned pale gray with grief. Within hours he was called back to what remained of his government. The old leaders were gone, and someone needed to speak for his species. Sir was young and inexperienced, but he carried the family name of the High Arbiter. That would have to be enough. He found chaos waiting for him. Minor officials argued about who was in charge. Military commanders demanded orders that no one could give. Citizens filled the streets, some crying, some angry, all of them afraid. 300,000 years of order had ended in a single moment, and no one knew what came next. Sir did his best to bring calm. He spoke to the crowds, promising that answers would come. He met with military leaders, telling them to hold their positions until they understood what had happened. He reached out to other Council species, finding that they faced the same confusion, the same fear. But everywhere he went, one question repeated: what did the humans do? The humans, that small species from a small planet, the ones who had refused to obey, the ones who had looked at the Galactic Council and said, no, they had done this. Everyone knew it, even if no one could prove it. The planet Cracker fleet still waited at Sol's edge, but its commanders no longer spoke of destroying Earth. They spoke of retreat, of survival, of not becoming the next targets. One by one, the great ships turned away and began the long journey home. They had come to crush a rebellious species, and they left as the survivors of something they did not understand. On Earth, director Miriam Chen called a Press conference. She stood before cameras that broadcast her image across the galaxy, speaking in a calm and measured voice. Her words were translated into 1,000 languages, heard by trillions of beings who wanted to understand what had happened. Galactic Council threatened the people of Earth with extinction, she said. We responded to that threat. We express our sincere condolences for the difficulties that Council species are now experiencing during this transition period. A reporter raised her hand. Director Chen, are you saying that Earth is responsible for the disappearance of the Council leadership? Shen's expression did not change. I am saying that Earth defended itself. We did not seek conflict with the Council, but when someone threatens to destroy your world, you must respond. Another reporter shouted a question. What weapon did you use? How did you make them vanish? Chen smiled that same small, polite smile she had shown to Velkith moments before his disappearance. I'm afraid I cannot discuss matters of planetary security. What I can say is that Earth poses no threat to any species that treats us with respect. We are happy to live in peace with all who wish it, but the Council made its choice, Chen said, her voice growing slightly harder. They chose violence. They chose extinction. We offered them peace and they refused. We gave them a chance to reconsider and they laughed. Now they are gone and we remain. Perhaps that is the lesson the galaxy should take from this moment. She ended the press conference and walked away from the cameras. Sir watched the broadcast from his temporary office, surrounded by advisors who looked as lost as he felt. The human woman terrified him, not because she was angry or threatening, but because she was so calm. She spoke of erasing the most powerful beings in the galaxy as if it were a minor inconvenience, an unfortunate necessity that she regretted but would not apologize for. We need to know how they did it, one advisor said. If we understand their weapon, we can defend against it. Can we, sir asked. The Council had the greatest military power in galactic history. They had technologies that took hundreds of thousands of years to develop, and the humans erased them in seconds. I do not think there is a defense against whatever they have. Then what do we do? Sir looked out his window at the city below, where millions of his people lived in fear of a species they had tried to destroy. He thought of his uncle, the mighty High Arbiter, vanished without a trace. He thought of the empty thrones on Nexus Prime, the silence where there should have been power. We learn, he said quietly. We find out everything we can about the humans, who they are, where they came from, how they built something that can do this. He turned away from the window, and we pray that they meant what they said about wanting peace, because if they decide to use that weapon again, there is nothing in this galaxy that can stop them. The investigation would take him to places he never expected. It would show him truths that had been hidden for 300,000 years. It would change everything he believed about the universe and humanity's place in it, but that was still to come. For now, Cyrus simply stood in his office and tried to accept that the galaxy he had known was gone, forever, replaced by something new and strange and terrifying. Somewhere on Earth, Director Chen returned to her office deep beneath the mountains. She looked at screens showing the chaos spreading across the galaxy, the fear and confusion of species that had never imagined this could happen. She felt no joy in their suffering. She felt only a deep, tired sadness, the weight of knowing that humanity had been forced to remember things they had spent so long trying to forget. The game had changed, the old rules were gone, and now the galaxy would have to learn new ones. 6 months passed and the galaxy remained in chaos. Without the Council, old conflicts returned. Species that had been forced to make peace now remembered their ancient hatreds. Border wars erupted across dozens of systems. Trade routes collapsed. Refugees fled from violence, filling space stations and colony worlds beyond their capacity. Sir watched it all and felt helpless. His species had once ruled alongside the other council members, commanding fleets and deciding the fates of civilizations. Now they struggled just to maintain order on their own worlds. The power they had taken for granted was gone, and nothing had risen to replace it. But Sir had not given up his search for answers. Every night after his official duties were done, he returned to his investigation. He studied recordings from the final moments on Nexus Prime. He analyzed energy readings from the instant the council vanished. He interviewed survivors and scientists and anyone who might understand what had happened. Most of what he found was useless. The technology that erased the council left almost no traces, no radiation signatures, no dimensional distortions, no evidence of any known weapon system. It was as if the council members had simply decided to stop existing, and the universe had agreed. But one thing caught Sir's attention: a ghost signal. In the fraction of a second before the darkness fell on Nexus Prime, the station's sensors had detected something strange, a transmission on a frequency that no known species used. It lasted less than a heartbeat, too short to be analyzed in real time, but when zeroed it down, when he broke it into pieces and studied each fragment, he found patterns, old patterns, ancient patterns, patterns that matched nothing in the Council's vast databases of galactic communications, almost nothing deep in the restricted archives, in files that required the highest security clearance to access. Sir found a single reference. The pattern matched transmissions that had been detected 300,000 years ago, when the Council species were still primitive creatures barely learning to use fire. The transmissions had come from beings called the Architects. Sir had heard the name before. Every child in the galaxy learned about the Architects in school, though the lessons were always vague. They were an ancient civilization, impossibly advanced, who had built things beyond understanding. Then they vanished, leaving only ruins and mysteries behind. The Council species had found those ruins. They had studied the Architects' abandoned technologies, reverse engineering what they could understand, building their civilization on the foundation of what the Architects left behind: the great ships that crossed the galaxy, the weapons that cracked planets, the communication systems that linked 1,000 worlds. All of it came from fragments of Architect knowledge, but the Architects themselves were gone. They had disappeared so completely that no one knew if they had died or left, or simply chosen to stop existing. They were ghosts, memories of gods who had walked among the stars when the universe was young. Sir needed to know more. He needed to find records that went deeper than the official histories, documents that might explain what the Architects had truly been and where they had gone. That meant visiting the burned library of Kethis. The library existed on a dead moon. Orbiting a dying star, it held knowledge that the Council had declared forbidden. Records of events and discoveries that were considered too dangerous for ordinary beings to know. Accessing it required permissions that Sir no longer had, approvals from authorities that no longer existed. Snorts, he went anyway. The journey took 3 weeks. Sir traveled alone using a small ship that would not attract attention. He told no one where he was going. If the library still had guardians, they might try to stop him. If other species learned what he was seeking, they might try to reach the knowledge first. The burned library lived up to its name. It had been attacked many times over the centuries by those who wanted to destroy its knowledge and those who wanted to steal it. Sections of the structure were open to vacuum, others were filled with toxic gases. The artificial intelligence that had once managed its collection had gone mad long ago and now spoke only riddles and screams, but the archives remained hidden in vaults deep beneath the surface, protected by locks that required genetic codes from species that no longer existed. The forbidden knowledge waited for those brave or foolish enough to seek it. Sir spent days working through the library's defenses. He solved puzzles left by ancient scholars. He bypassed security systems that had been designed by minds far greater than his own. He listened to the mad AI ramble about things it remembered and things it had invented, trying to separate truth from nonsense. Finally, he found what he was looking for. The file was old, older than the Council itself. It described the architects in detail that Sir had never seen before. Not the vague legends taught in schools, but real information gathered by the first explorers who had found architect ruins. The architects had not been a single species. They had been a civilization of many species, united by technology so advanced that the differences between their bodies no longer mattered. They had built gates between stars that allowed instant travel across the galaxy. They had created engines that could move planets. They had developed weapons that could erase matter from existence without leaving any trace. They had been gods, or close enough that the difference did not matter. And then 300,000 years ago they had looked at what they had become and felt horror. The file contained fragments of architect records, translated imperfectly by scholars who did not fully understand the language. But the meaning was clear enough. The architects had realized that their power made them monsters. They could destroy anything, anyone, anywhere. They could reshape the universe according to their will, and that power had begun to corrupt them. So they made a choice. They would forget. They would erase their own memories, hide their technologies, reduce themselves to primitive forms that could not threaten anyone. They would start over, learning to be mortal again, learning to be small and weak and kind. They seated themselves on a single world, a small planet orbiting an unremarkable star. They locked their technologies behind genetic barriers that would only open if their descendants faced extinction. They hoped those barriers would never be needed. They hoped their children would be allowed to live in peace. The last coordinates in the architect records pointed to a yellow star in a quiet corner of the galaxy. Humans called that star Sol. Sir read the file 3 times, making sure he understood what it said. His scales shifted through colors he could not control. The humans were not a young species that had somehow developed impossible technology. They were the architects themselves, the ancient builders of everything the Council had used to rule the galaxy. They had chosen to forget their power, to become something gentler and smaller, and better, and then the Council had threatened to destroy them. The genetic locks had opened, the sleeping memories had awakened, the humans had remembered what they truly were, what they could do, what they had always been capable of doing. The Council had not been erased by a weapon, it had been erased by gods who had woken from a very long sleep. Surret in the darkness of the burned library, surrounded by forbidden knowledge, and tried to understand what this meant for the galaxy. The humans had the power to destroy everything. They had used that power once before against the Council that threatened them. Would they use it again? Would they become the monsters they had once been, or would they find a way to remain the peaceful species they had tried so hard to become? He did not know. He could not know, but he understood now that the fate of every living being in the galaxy depended on what humanity chose to do next. Sir copied the files, secured them in encrypted storage, and began the long journey back to civilization. He had found his answers. Now he needed to find the courage to face what those answers meant. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a small voice whispered a question he could not escape. If the architects had once been so horrified by their power that they chose to forget it, what would the humans do now that they had been forced to remember? Sir did not expect Director Chen to answer his message. He had sent a request through official diplomatic channels asking for a meeting to discuss the future relationship between humanity and the surviving Council species. He had included no mention of what he had learned in the burned library. He had tried to sound like just another diplomat seeking peaceful contact. The response came within hours, an invitation to visit Earth. The journey terrified him. His ship approached Sol system, slowly passing through space, where the planet Cracker fleet had once waited. He half expected to vanish at any moment, erased like his uncle and the other Council members, but nothing happened. His ship was scanned, guided to a landing zone, and welcomed with all the proper diplomatic courtesies. Earth was beautiful. Sir had seen many worlds, but few matched the variety of this one. Blue oceans, green forests, white clouds, brown mountains, all mixing together in patterns that seemed almost artistic. Billions of humans lived here, going about their daily lives, apparently unconcerned that their species had just reshaped the galaxy. Director Chen met him at the landing field. She looked the same as she had in the broadcasts, calm, professional, unremarkable. Nothing about her suggested that she commanded power beyond imagination. "Welcome to Earth," she said. "I understand you have questions." "I have learned things," Cyrus replied. "Things about the architects, things about humanity. I need to understand if what I learned is true." Chen studied him for a long moment. Her eyes were older than her face suggested. They held knowledge that weighted heavily. "Come with me," she said. They traveled to the mountains, to a place where snow covered the peaks and cold winds blew through narrow valleys. Chen led Sir to an ordinary-looking building, a simple structure of stone and metal that could have been any government facility. Then she took him underground. The elevator descended for a long time. Sir watched the numbers climb. 1 km, 2 km, 3. When the doors finally opened, he stepped into a place that should not have existed. The facility beneath the Himalayas was vast. Corridors stretched in directions that did not make sense. Rooms existed in multiple dimensions at once, their contents shifting when viewed from different angles. Machines hummed with energies that sirs instruments could not identify, and everywhere, sleeping in crystalline cases waiting for activation, were weapons, not weapons like the Council's planet crackers, crude things that broke worlds through brute force. These were elegant, precise, designed by minds that understood physics, had levels no modern species had reached. Some of them looked like artwork, others looked like nothing at all. Shapes that hurt the eyes and refused to stay fixed in memory. This is the Office of Quiet Affairs, Chen said. We have existed for longer than humans have recorded history. Our purpose is to protect Earth from threats and to guard the inheritance until it is needed. The inheritance, sir, repeated the architect. Technology, you found the records in the burned library. It was not a question. We knew someone would. Eventually, we have been watching you since you began your investigation. Sir felt cold. Then you know why I am here. I need to understand. Are humans truly the architects? Did you really forget what you were? Chen led him deeper into the facility, past rooms that contained things he could not name, until they reached a chamber at the very center. It was empty except for a single display, a holographic image of a figure that looked almost human, but somehow more. 300,000 years ago, Chen began. The beings you call architects reached the peak of their power. They could travel anywhere instantly. They could build anything they imagined. They could destroy anything that stood in their way. They had become gods. She touched the display and the image changed, showing stars being rearranged, planets being moved, civilizations being erased. And it horrified them, not because they suffered, but because they caused suffering. Their power made them careless. Their abilities made them cruel. They looked at the galaxy they had shaped and saw only the marks of their own arrogance. So they chose to forget. Sir said they chose to become mortal again. They removed their enhancements, locked away their technologies, erased their memories of what they had been. They seated themselves on this world, single species starting fresh with no knowledge of their history. But you did not forget everything. The technology is still here. You remember? Shen nodded. Slowly, the architects knew that someday their descendants might face extinction, a threat they could not survive without the old power. So they built safeguards, genetic locks that would open only if humanity was truly in danger, memories that would return when they were absolutely needed. Council's ultimatum, sir, understood. When they threatened to destroy Earth, it triggered the locks. Yes, Chen's voice carried deep sadness. We did not want this. For 300,000 years we lived as mortals. We fought our own wars, made our own mistakes, slowly learned to be better than we were. We built civilizations and watched them fall. We hurt each other and learned to heal. We became something new, something that was not architect, but was not entirely separate from them either. She turned to face him directly. We spent all that time learning to be kind, learning to find meaning in small things, immortal things, learning that power is not the same as wisdom. And then your council forced us to remember what we truly are. Sir thought of his uncle, the High Arbiter, who had laughed at the idea of humans resisting. He thought of the council members who had treated humanity as children playing with toys they did not understand. "What will you do now?" he asked. "You have the power to rule the galaxy, to destroy anyone who opposes you. Will you become what the architects were before?" Chen was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but firm. "That is the question we are asking ourselves. The power has returned. The memories have returned. We could reshape the galaxy according to our will. We could end all wars, force all species into peace, create a perfect order that would last forever. But we remember why the architects chose to forget. We remember the horror of looking at ourselves and seeing monsters. We do not want to become that again." She led him out of the central chamber, back through the corridors of impossible technology. Humanity has spent 300,000 years learning a lesson that the architects never fully understood. Power alone does not make you good. Ability to destroy does not give you the right to rule. True strength is not in what you can do, but in what you choose not to do. They reached a garden somehow, existing deep underground, filled with plants from Earth and 100 other worlds. Chen sat on a bench and gestured for Sir to join her. "We remember how to erase," she said, "but we also remember how to build. We remember the suffering we caused, and we remember the suffering we overcame. Both memories matter. Both inheritances are real. Then what will humanity choose?" Shen looked at the garden, at the flowers that bloomed in artificial light, at the trees that grew in soil carried from the surface. "We are still deciding, but I can tell you what I believe. I believe that we did not spend 300,000 years becoming human just to throw it away. I believe that the mortal things we learned, the kindness and the hope and the struggle to be better, those things matter more than all the power in the galaxy." She stood and offered, "Sir, come, there is something else I want to show you, something that might help you understand who we are trying to be." Sir took her hand and followed her into the unknown, carrying with him the weight of everything he had learned and the fragile hope that humanity might find a way to be something better than gods. Director Chen took Sir to a city called Geneva, on the shore of a great lake, surrounded by mountains. It was an old city by human standards, filled with buildings that had stood for centuries and monuments to events that Sir did not understand. She brought him to a garden. It was not a large garden, just a quiet space of grass and trees and carefully placed stones. Each stone carried names, thousands of names written in dozens of human languages. Some stones were very old, their letters worn by time and weather. Others were newer, still sharp and clear. "What is this place, Sir?" asked. "A memorial," Chen said. "We built it to remember those who died in our wars, not just one war, but many centuries of conflict, millions of deaths, all the suffering that humans caused to each other before we learned better ways." Each name was a person who had lived and died, caught up in violence that had seemed so important at the time. The architects had no memorials like this. Chen continued. They were so powerful that death rarely touched them. When it did, they simply moved on. They did not understand loss the way mortals do, but humans understand it. We understand it deeply. We have buried our children and our parents and our friends. We have stood in places like this and wept for what we lost. That understanding changed us. It made us value peace in a way the architects never did. She sat on a bench, facing the lake. The sun was setting, painting the water in colors of gold and red. The galaxy is in chaos, or beside her, without the council, species that were at peace are returning to war. Old hatreds are awakening. Millions will die if someone does not restore order. We know, Chen said. Will you become the new rulers of the galaxy? Chen was quiet for a long moment. A bird sang somewhere in the garden. Children played on a distant lawn, their laughter carrying through the evening air. We have decided, she finally said. The announcement will go out tomorrow, but I will tell you now, because you deserve to know. Sir held his breath. Humanity will not rule the galaxy. We will not build an empire. We will not force other species to obey our laws or follow our customs or accept our judgment on how they should live. Relief flooded through Sir, followed quickly by confusion. Then what will you do? The power you hold, the technology of the architects. You could end all conflicts. You could force peace on everyone. Yes, we could. The architects tried that once. You know, they imposed their order on the galaxy, removed threats before they could grow, shaped civilizations to be peaceful and productive. Peace that is forced is not true peace. It is just a different kind of prison. But without some authority, without someone to maintain order, the wars will continue, perhaps, but perhaps not. Chen turned to face him. We have decided to become something new, not rulers, not conquerors, not even protectors. We will be witnesses. Witnesses. We will watch. We will remember, and we will make one promise to the galaxy, a promise that we will keep until the end of time. Her eyes grew hard, and for a moment saw something ancient behind them, something that remembered being a god. Any species that tries to do what the council did, any species that threatens extinction against another, will face the same fate the council faced. We will not interfere in your wars or your politics or your choices, but we will not allow genocide. We will not allow one species to wipe out another. That line cannot be crossed, and if someone crosses it, then they will disappear, just as the council disappeared cleanly, completely, without warning. We will erase those who try to erase others. Sir thought about this. It was a terrifying promise, but also a limited one. Humanity would not control the galaxy. They would not tell other species how to live. They would only draw one line, bright and clear, that could never be crossed. You are giving the galaxy freedom, he said slowly. Freedom to make its own choices, its own mistakes. Yes, freedom to fail and freedom to succeed. Freedom to learn the lessons we learned over 300,000 years of being mortal, but also fear of what you will do if that line is crossed. Chen nodded. Fear can be a teacher too. Perhaps not the best teacher, but sometimes a necessary one. The council ruled through fear, but it was fear without limits, fear that controlled everything. We offer fear with a single boundary. Stay within it and you will never see us. Cross it and you will never see anything again. The sun had set fully now, and stars were appearing in the darkening sky. Sir looked up at them, at the vast galaxy where so many species lived and fought and dreamed. Do you think it will work? He asked. Do you think species can learn to live together without being forced? I do not know, Chen admitted. We are trying something that has never been tried before. The architects ruled by power, the council ruled by force. We are trying to rule by absence, by stepping back and letting the galaxy find its own way. She stood and offered him her hand again. We would like you to help us, sir. You have traveled between our worlds. You have seen what we are and what we were. You could serve as a bridge, a liaison between humanity and the rest of the galaxy. You could help them understand what we are trying to do. Sir looked at her hand, thinking of his uncle, of the council that had ruled his life, of the future that waited to be built. Why me? He asked. Because you went looking for truth when you could have hidden from it. Because you came to Earth when you could have stayed safe at home. Because you want to understand, not just survive. Those qualities are rare and valuable. He took her hand and stood. I will help you, he said, but I have one more question first. The power you hold, the ability to erase entire civilization, does it tempt you? Does part of you want to use it to force the galaxy into the shape you think it should be? Chen was silent for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was very quiet. Every day I feel the pull of that power. Every day I remember what the architects could do and wonder if using that power would make things better. Temptation never goes away. Then how do you resist it? She looked at the memorial garden, at the stones carrying the names of the dead. I come here, I read the names. I remember what happens when beings with power decide they know better than everyone else. I remember that the architects were so horrified by their own choices that they chose to forget everything rather than continue being what they were. She turned back to, sir, we resist the temptation by remembering what we lost and what we learned, by honoring the 300,000 years we spent being small and weak and mortal, by believing that those years mattered more than all the power in the universe. Sir nodded slowly. He did not fully understand, but he was beginning to. Together they walked out of the memorial garden and into the city, where lights were coming on in windows and people were sitting down to dinner and children were being put to bed. Ordinary life continuing as it had for thousands of years, unaware of the cosmic forces that had almost destroyed it. The galaxy waited beyond the sky, uncertain and afraid, wondering what would come next. But in this small corner of Earth, on this quiet evening, there was peace, and perhaps Sir thought that was the whole point. The humans had remembered how to unmake worlds, but they had chosen to make gardens instead.